Rebecca knelt, her fingers brushing the damp soil, searching. Most of the pack, with their sleek coats and well-fed bellies, considered this patch of stunted growth and pale, wilting flora useless. To Rebecca, it was home, her sanctuary, and her meager pharmacy. And just like that, she found a patch of ginger root, its knobby fingers tucked beneath a decaying log. She harvested the scarce medicinal herbs, her sharp eyes noting the subtle decay in the plants around her. Muted colors bled into the once vibrant green. Shriveled leaves crumbled to dust at her touch. A weird stillness hung in the air, a silence where birds usually chirped. But then, she always dismissed it as just a bad season, a harsh reality of her solitary existence. Truth be told, she preferred it out here. No prying eyes, no whispered accusations. Rebecca's immediate goal was simple: get enough tinctures to barter in the nearest human village. Maybe she'd even get some fresh bread. She was focused, methodical, her movements efficient. Inside, a deep-seated resignation had settled into her bones, a quiet acceptance of her ostracized status within the pack she technically belonged to. Yet, beneath it, a fierce, almost defiant independence flickered like a stubborn ember. She even rehearsed her usual terse, dismissive responses in her head, just in case any pack member did stumble upon her. They never did. Why would they bother with an omega like her? A soft whine, barely audible over the rustling leaves, pulled Rebecca from her task. Her head snapped up. From there, she spotted him, a small, sickly pup, its fur matted and dull, limping into view, its golden eyes clouded with fever fixed on hers. What's worse, it coughed, a wet, ragged sound that echoed the blight's unseen presence. Rebecca's breath hitched, and a pang, sharp and unwelcome, lanced through her. She immediately tried to suppress it. No matter how hard she tried, her heart ached for the tiny creature. The pup stumbled closer, its desperate whines cutting through the quiet morning. Every instinct screamed at Rebecca to retreat, to maintain her distance from anything connected to the main pack. But the pup's distress was too potent. Its small body trembled with fever. She knew the pack wouldn't care for a runt like this, especially one so sick and lost on the outskirts. She would. Her body moved on instinct. Without thinking, Rebecca moved swiftly, gently examining the pup. As a result, she quickly retrieved a small, pungent poultice from her satchel, working with practiced, precise hands. Just as she finished, a shadow fell over them. Marcel. Alpha Marcel. He appeared like a storm cloud on the horizon, his dark furred form radiating raw power and barely leashed fury. And then, his golden eyes, usually sharp and commanding, narrowed, instantly assessing the scene. "What have you done to it, Omega?" His voice, a low growl, cut through the stillness, cold as a winter wind. He immediately assumed the worst, because of her past. He always did. He accused her of harming the pup, or worse, luring it away from the den. Rebecca's immediate goal was to protect the pup. After that, she would defend herself against Marcel's instant condemnation. Her defiance flared, hot and bright. "I'm helping it, Alpha," she retorted, her voice sharper than she intended, belying the knot of frustration and hurt twisting in her gut. She felt trapped, like a cornered animal, the familiar surge of rebellious anger rising to meet his baseless accusations. Why was she always the villain in their eyes? She didn't know what scared her more, his hatred or the strange pull she felt toward him. Marcel snatched the pup away, his movements swift and brutal. He dismissed Rebecca's actions with a scathing, almost contemptuous remark about her destructive assistance. The words were a physical blow sharper than any slap. Not only that, but he turned, carrying the shivering pup away. And then, a faint, almost invisible wisp of corrupted energy seemed to float from the pup and brush past Marcel unnoticed by him, hinting at the true insidious nature of the sickness. Rebecca felt a shiver, cold despite the growing warmth of the sun, and the hair on her arms stood on end. She felt it, clear as day. Days later, A solemn summons echoed across the territory, pulling Rebecca unwillingly toward the heart of the Moonstone Pack's ancient den. She stayed in the shadows, clinging to the periphery, a familiar ghost. The air inside the den, usually vibrant with the pulse of the pack, felt heavy, choked with unspoken fear. It was like breathing thick dust. A tense pack meeting was in session, called by Marcel. His voice, usually so steady it could calm a raging storm, carried an edge of desperation now. He spoke of dwindling resources, inexplicable illnesses, and the worsening decay of their hunting grounds. He tried to rally his wolves, but a palpable undercurrent of fear and disunity rippled through the assembled pack. It was a visible wound, bleeding doubt into their ranks. Rebecca, from her hidden vantage point, observed the visible decline of her community. She noticed subtle shifts in Marcel's usually unwavering leadership, a flicker of desperation beneath his hardened, formidable exterior. His broad shoulders, Rebecca noted with a detached part of her mind, seemed to carry an unbearable weight, like a mountain about to crumble. Rebecca's initial goal was to remain utterly unseen, a phantom in the background, observing the pack's suffering from a safe, detached distance. Her emotional state was a complex tapestry of detached observation, a familiar sense of exclusion that pricked at old wounds, and a growing, unsettling unease about the pack's obvious weakening. A deeply buried part of her, one she fought fiercely to suppress, felt a pang of concern. The fate of the pack, despite her resentment and their disdain, was inextricably linked to her own. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just her wolf stirring. Without warning, a sudden, inexplicable tremor ran through the ancient den. It caused dust and small rocks to dislodge and fall from the ceiling carvings, like tears from stone eyes. A collective gasp, then a surge of profound unease washed over the assembled wolves. This wasn't a natural tremor. It was a deep, resonant hum, a dark energy vibrating through the earth itself. It was the first tangible sign of the Blight's direct influence on their sacred ground, a sinister pulse. Rebecca felt it resonate, a sickening vibration deep within her own bones. And just like that, everything changed. Her world tilted. Her heart skipped. The chill from the den's tremor still clung to Rebecca, making her skin prickle. Her thoughts spun, a frantic hummingbird trapped in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that something truly terrible was about to happen. And then, a sound that ripped through the stone, a roar of twisting metal and splintering rock. The very heart of the den, where Marcel had been in private reflection, seemed to explode inward. Dust, thick and suffocating, billowed through the ancient passages. Rebecca's breath caught. She didn't think. Her body moved on instinct, pulled by an inexplicable force, a budding destiny she couldn't comprehend. What followed was chaos. Boulders, the size of wolf dens, crumbled from the ceiling. Deep down she knew the truth. Marcel was trapped. He was injured, maybe even worse. As if pulled by a string, she found herself scrambling over debris, shards of ancient stone biting into her hands. The air thickened with dust and fear. She heard Marcel's ragged grunt, a sound of pain and surprise. He was under a massive slab, his arm pinned. Without thinking, Rebecca reached for him. Her fingers brushed his bare forearm. And just like that, everything changed. A searing heat exploded where their skins met, hotter than any fire. It wasn't just heat. It was an excruciating pain that ripped through her, followed by an overwhelming, unwanted wave of primal desire. The mistaken, steamy mark flared onto their bodies, a branding, a primal, magical burn. Rebecca cried out, a strangled sound. Her immediate goal was to escape this searing connection, to pull away violently, but a deeper instinct, raw and ancient, compelled her to stay. She was horrified and utterly confused. The space between them burned. Her chest ached with a feeling she couldn't name. As the mark burned on their skin, an ancient, almost forgotten prophecy etched into the den walls illuminated, its glowing lines pointing directly at them. It pulsed with a soft, otherworldly light. And then, a vision. chaotic and visceral, flashed through Rebecca's mind. Two warring wolves, snarling, tearing at each other. Then, a sudden blinding light, and they were one, a unified force, saving their pack from encroaching shadows. It felt like a dream, yet so real. The pain of the mark still throbbed, a physical and emotional bruise. Marcel, now free but reeling from the mark's imposition and the accompanying vision, stared at Rebecca with furious disbelief. His golden eyes, usually so commanding, were now wild with raw anger, escalating into pure hatred. "What dark magic is this, Omega?" he snarled, his voice a low growl that vibrated through her very bones. "Is this some trick? A way to force yourself on me?" He accused her of dark magic, a trick to bind him. His breath came in ragged gasps. Rebecca, equally traumatized and repulsed by the forced connection, lashed back. "A trick? You think I want this, Alpha? This curse?" Their raw emotions, their fury and disgust, fueled the mark's painful pulsation, making it burn even brighter. She felt trapped, like a fly in a spiderweb. Her goal was to deny the mark's reality, to break free from this unwanted bond and Marcel's cutting accusations. She was terrified, disgusted by the forced intimacy, and defensive against Marcel's renewed hatred. Before either could speak, the pack elders, drawn by the commotion and the strange, pulsing light of the prophecy, arrived. Their faces, usually stoic, showed deep concern. As the silence stretched, the eldest, a wizened she-wolf named Mara, confirmed the dire implications of the mark. "It is the binding of the antithesis." Mara's voice trembled because this was the long-feared union. A volatile union, prophesied to either save or utterly destroy our pack. Rebecca's world tilted again. Not only were they bound, but their bond carried such a heavy weight. Marcel, his face contorted with rage, made a sudden, desperate move. He tried to tear the mark from his flesh, clawing at his forearm, but then it only burned brighter, forcing him to his knees in agony. His raw vulnerability, unseen before, gave Rebecca a momentary, unsettling glimpse beneath his hostile facade. His wolf pressed forward, fighting the bond, even as the mark pulsed with overwhelming desire. In the quiet that followed Marcel's pained gasp, the weight of the elder's words settled like a shroud. The undeniable truth of the prophecy hung in the air, thick and suffocating, because the mark blazed on their skin, a constant, painful reminder. Even so, the increasing signs of the blight, the sickly pups, the wilting plants, the growing fear in the pack, made it clear. Something had to be done. Mara, her ancient eyes fixed on Rebecca and Marcel, spoke with grave authority. "The prophecy demands it. For the pack's survival, you will remain in close proximity." What followed was the elders' decree. Rebecca and Marcel must live together in a guarded section of the den. This was a forced collaboration, a cruel twist of fate Rebecca never saw coming. She didn't know what scared her more, the blight or living with him. Rebecca's immediate goal shifted from denying the mark to finding a way to mitigate its agonizing effects. She had to endure Marcel's hateful presence. More importantly, she needed to secretly hope for a way out, to find a loophole in this terrible prophecy. She resolved to find another solution, convinced this couldn't be the only way to save their pack. She was Rebecca, the Omega outcast, not some fated savior. Rebecca was now irrevocably thrust into the very heart of the pack, in the most uncomfortable position possible. Her ordinary world was shattered. She was forced into the conflict, no longer able to stay on the fringes. The space between them, once a chasm of indifference, was now a constant, burning reminder of their unwilling bond. Her bones remembered him. The air thickened. Rebecca was trapped, bound to the Alpha who hated her, for a destiny neither of them wanted. And the real question was, could they survive each other long enough to save anyone else? Unacknowledged tension. Rebecca and Marcel were confined, truly confined. They lived under the watchful eyes of the elders, forced into an intimacy neither desired. Even so, the forced proximity led to constant, simmering tension, like a pot about to boil over. What followed were explosive arguments, sharp words, and cutting glances. And then, each time, the mark on their skin would flare, a searing, electric current that pulsed with excruciating pain. It forced them into unwanted closeness, an instinctual press of bodies, because only by touching, by leaning into the burn, could the pain subside. It was a cruel survival mechanism. Rebecca's hitched. She'd pull back the second the pain eased, disgusted, violated. Her immediate goal was to establish boundaries, to find any personal space she could. She longed for the quiet solitude of the outskirts. She also needed to learn to control the mark's intrusions. It was a horrifying invasion of privacy. Not only that, but they discovered the mark gave them flashes of each other's emotions, desires, even fragmented memories. She felt disgusted, violated, and deeply frustrated by the constant emotional assault from Marcel's overwhelming resentment. She could feel his anger, his weariness, his dark disapproval, all amplified by their unwanted bond. She hated it. And just like that, her defenses were being chipped away, painful piece by painful piece. During one particularly bitter argument, Rebecca lashed out, "You think you're the only one suffering, Alpha?" The mark pulsed, and then she inadvertently saw a flash of Marcel's deep-seated trauma. It was a fragmented, distorted image, a younger Marcel, his face pale with shock, surrounded by a devastation she recognized as the disaster she caused. She felt a profound wave of guilt, then confusion. He, in turn, glimpsed her profound loneliness and desperate need for acceptance, a raw ache that startled him. His gaze hardened almost immediately, but a flicker of something new crossed his face. The blight didn't care about their personal drama. It intensified, creeping further into the pack's very essence. Crucial healing plants withered, turning brittle and black. Hunting returns dwindled, leaving bellies grumbling and faces gaunt. What's worse, even previously docile pack animals, once friendly, became aggressive, snarling at their own kind. Marcel, burdened by the pack's suffering, tried everything. He sent out more hunting parties, tried traditional remedies, but they all failed. The pack's hope, already fragile, began to fray. Rebecca, ever observant from her forced proximity, watched his failures. She saw the desperation in his golden eyes, even as he tried to hide it. Because of her life as an outcast, she knew the land better than any of them. She understood the blight's patterns intuitively. Instead of openly defying him, she quietly used her knowledge to provide subtle, unasked-for assistance. Moments later, she'd leave a modified poultice near an ailing wolf, or casually mention a change in wind direction that might affect a hunting strategy, always just out of sight. She didn't want the credit, not from him. Her goal was simple: alleviate the pack's suffering. She felt a conflicted sense of duty, a strange pull to help the pack she resented. But there was also a perverse satisfaction in seeing her skills prove useful, even if unacknowledged. She knew she could make a difference, even if they refused to see it. One afternoon, Rebecca carefully altered a traditional fever-reducing balm, adding a rare root she'd found on the fringes. By the time it was applied, the fever of a young she-wolf broke, unexpectedly yielding a small positive result. Not only that, but it was noticed by the elders, who exchanged knowing glances. And just like that, a flicker of grudging acknowledgement, fleeting as a shadow, crossed Marcel's face, though he quickly masked it. He still wouldn't look at her. The blight lashed out again, a direct hit. The life-giving river, their vital water source, became contaminated. Its clear waters turned murky, its banks slick with a strange, dark slime. Soon after, widespread illness swept through the den, hitting the weakest first, the very young and the very old. Marcel, desperate, his usual authority crumbling under the pressure, tried a forceful, traditional pack ritual at the poisoned riverbank. It involved chanting and blood sacrifices. But then it only made things worse. The blight pulsed, feeding on the despair. Rebecca, witnessing the escalating crisis, knew the traditional methods were useless. Her heart ached for the suffering. Without thinking, she impulsively stepped forward, ignoring the angry whispers of the pack and Marcel's narrowed eyes. Her goal was to save her pack, despite herself, and to prove her method. She pushed through the crowd, drawn by an undeniable urgency. Because of her unique connection to the land, her Omega heritage, she began a ritual of her own. It was almost shamanistic, a quiet, guttural song that pulled on the very essence of the earth. She knelt by the murky water, placing her hands in it, letting the blight's cold tendrils seep into her. As her wolf pressed forward, Rebecca felt an immense pain, like lightning striking her soul. She was purifying a portion of the water, absorbing the blight's corruption into herself, suffering immensely from the exertion. She felt a profound sense of self-sacrifice and a growing frustration that her true intentions were constantly misinterpreted. Why couldn't they see she was trying to help? As the purified water flowed, clear and clean, Marcel was forced to look at Rebecca. Her face was covered in sweat, her body trembling with pain. In that moment, for a fleeting second, his hatred was eclipsed by a flicker of awe and unwilling respect. The mark on their skin pulsed with a dull ache, mirroring the internal shift within him, a reluctant acknowledgement of her power. Her chest ached, but this time, it wasn't just pain. It was a new, unsettling feeling. And just like that, the true fight began. Rebecca's skin still tingled from the last time the mark had flared, a ghost of Marcel's fury, and was it longing, lingering in her bones? The elders, those ancient, unyielding wolves, had seen her power. They had witnessed the water's purification. Because of that, they insisted on formal cooperation between her and Marcel. What followed were training sessions, which felt more like elaborate torture. They were meant to learn to harness the mark's power, allowing them to briefly synchronize their minds and track the blight's creeping spread. Not only that, but these sessions were fraught with conflict, a constant battle of wills. "Focus, Omega!" Marcel would snarl, his voice rough as sandpaper. "Feel the blight, not this." His gaze would drop to her lips, then quickly snap away. And just like that, the air would crackle. The sessions were fraught with conflict, but then there were the accidental flashes. Moments of undeniable steamy desire that neither could ignore as their animalistic instincts were amplified by the bond. Rebecca would feel Marcel's raw need, a possessive heat that made her breath catch. Her own body would respond, a traitorous warmth pooling low in her belly. Rebecca's immediate goal was to master the mark. She needed to help the pack, yes, but also to gain control over this unwelcome physical and emotional intimacy. She felt utterly conflicted, a mixture of growing competence because she was good at this, she realized, mixed with increasing discomfort. The sexual tension was thick enough to cut with a claw, and her fierce resistance to her own body's reactions to Marcel felt like a losing battle. He was fire, she was kindling, and the mark was fanning the flames. During one particularly intense synchronization exercise, Rebecca pressed her palms against Marcel's, their marks burning. The den faded, and then she accidentally saw a memory of Marcel's. It was fragmented, like shattered glass. A younger Marcel, his face etched with agony, an impossible choice. The disaster she caused, but from his perspective. She felt the crushing weight of his past burden, the terror of his decision. It was a horrifying glimpse into his trauma, shifting her perspective slightly. Her chest ached with a new kind of sympathy. The memory haunted Rebecca, a ghost whispering in her mind. Marcel's pain, his impossible choice. It didn't excuse his hatred, but it softened its edges, made it understandable. Not only that, but a strange pull led them deeper into the ancient den. Maybe it was fate. Soon after, they discovered a hidden chamber, untouched by the blight's creeping rot. The air within was surprisingly clean, almost sacred. And just like that, everything changed. Inside, they found clearer, more detailed carvings of the prophecy. Not the faded, broken lines they'd seen before, but vibrant, glowing images. As the truth unraveled, Rebecca's breath hitched. Her past, disastrous help hadn't been a mistake. It had been a necessary catalyst. It had inadvertently saved the pack from an even greater immediate threat, a deeper corruption, because the elder Rebecca had betrayed was actually a corrupted servant of the Blight, a wolf who had secretly poisoned the pack from within. The knowledge hit Marcel like a physical blow. His perception of Rebecca shattered. His own trauma, born of perceived failure, crumbled. The mark pulsed violently, an earthquake of recognition, signifying this major shift. Rebecca's goal shifted from seeking external validation to understanding her own unwitting role in destiny. She felt a profound mix of vindication. She hadn't been wrong all along, but also confusion. A chilling fear at the true extent of her past's impact and the overwhelming weight of the prophecy settled upon her. This wasn't just about saving the pack. It was about accepting her purpose. And just like that, the game changed. The stakes were no longer just about survival, they were personal, rooted in a destiny neither of them had chosen. The path to defeating the Blight became terrifyingly clear. Their full, willing union was essential. Overwhelmed by the revelation, Marcel was forced to look at Rebecca with new eyes. His golden gaze held a flicker of something akin to regret, and even respect, replacing the cold hatred. The intense emotions between them, amplified by the mark, led to a moment of raw, unwilling physical contact. He reached for her, almost without thinking, his hand finding her arm. It was a desperate, confused embrace that was both hostile and deeply desired. Like a wolf fighting a trap, only to find the trap was also a caress. The Blight, that insidious force, pulsed with renewed fury, sensing their growing understanding. Sensing the deepening of their bond, it retaliated fiercely, no longer just a passive decay, but an active, vengeful entity. This time, it struck in a personal way. The pup Rebecca had saved, the one that had first drawn Marcel's ire, suddenly began to show signs of regression. Its fur dulled, its breath hitched, its fever returned with a vengeance. Marcel, seeing the small creature, his own guilt resurfacing, stared at Rebecca. His ingrained biases warred with the truth he'd just uncovered. He had to acknowledge Rebecca's crucial role, not just for the pup, but for the entire pack. With every heartbeat, the urgency grew. He swallowed his pride, a bitter pill. She saved it once. He rasped, his voice rough. She knows what to do. And just like that, he took a public stand for her, a monumental shift in his leadership. The pack murmured, surprised, as Rebecca moved to the pup, her new understanding of the Blight guiding her. Rebecca's goal was to protect the vulnerable, using her new understanding of the Blight's weakness. She felt a surge of unexpected protectiveness from Marcel, a silent acknowledgement that stirred something deep inside her. A new, unsettling awareness of their combined power and the devastating consequences if they failed, washed over her. Their combined effort was visibly necessary because the Blight was no longer a silent enemy. It was a roaring beast, demanding their unity. Marcel, in a rare display of raw vulnerability, stepped closer. "Rebecca," he began, his voice low, almost a whisper. I was wrong." He didn't apologize for his hatred, not yet, because the trauma was too deeply ingrained. But then, he admitted his misjudgment of her past actions. It was a monumental admission, revealing the agonizing difficulty of his internal transformation. The mark throbbed with this painful admission, a dull ache that spoke of unspoken truths and burgeoning possibilities. The air thickened around them, heavy with what was unsaid. The revelation about the prophecy had ripped open old wounds for Marcel, but it had also cleared the murky waters of Rebecca's past. Now, with the truth revealed, they were forced to openly cooperate. Not only that, but the elders insisted on it, eyes sharp with purpose. What followed was a crucial, difficult ritual. It wasn't just a ceremony, it was a grueling journey, a series of intense physical and emotional trials designed to strengthen their bond and counter the Blight. They plunged into ancient hidden pools, their bodies aching, pushing each other to the brink. During these trials, the mark's power intensified, a constant hum beneath their skin. It frequently forced them into close, unavoidable physical contact. A hand would brush a hip too long, a shared breath would linger. The air thickened. Their animalistic instincts, raw and untamed, were amplified by the bond. And then, the unwanted desire became undeniably mutual. It led to volatile, charged moments of near intimacy that they both fiercely resisted, yet secretly craved. Rebecca would feel Marcel's powerful body too close, his scent intoxicating, and her own wolf would stir, restless and hungry. Rebecca's goal was to fully embrace her power and the prophecy's demands, pushing through her discomfort with Marcel. She was driven by a fierce desire to save the pack, because its future now rested on her shoulders, on their shoulders. But then she was also increasingly consumed by the raw, confusing pull towards Marcel. She felt a desperate longing for control over her own body and emotions, even as they blatantly betrayed her, blooming beneath her skin. This was the explicit start of the steamy romance, a battle fought as much within themselves as against the blight. During a shared moment of utter exhaustion after a particularly taxing ritual, they lay sprawled on the cold stone floor of a secluded cavern. The mark pulsed intensely, a living thing vibrating between them. Their eyes met, golden locking with stormy gray. The raw, animalistic desire was so potent it was almost painful. Marcel reached for her, his hand trembling slightly, a primal urge overcoming his reason. His fingers traced the line of her jaw. Rebecca, equally overwhelmed, didn't pull away. Her breath caught. The space between them burned. The moment their eyes locked, the air crackled. The raw desire from the previous scene, long suppressed, long denied, culminated in their first involuntary, explosive, and exquisitely steamy, intimate encounter. It was driven by the overwhelming power of the mark and their suppressed emotions rather than conscious choice. What followed was a collision of hostility and yearning, a desperate dance of bodies that neither could control. It was messy, passionate, and filled with a volatile mix of hate-fueled desire, confusion, and a reluctant surrender. Her wolf pressed forward, and she let it happen. His growl rose in his throat, a sound of pure possession. Rebecca's goal was to understand what had just happened between them, to reconcile the intense pleasure with the underlying resentment and confusion that still lingered like a bitter aftertaste. She felt a profound mix of shame, exhilaration, and a terrifying realization of the depth of their fated bond. In fact, it was more than frightening, it was consuming. This scene solidified the steamy aspect of their enemies to lovers arc, irrevocably changing their relationship and their personal understanding of the prophecy. Moments later, the blight reacted violently. As if summoned by their forbidden union, it unleashed a direct attack. The den itself seemed to groan, a keypack resource, perhaps the communal food stores, collapsing. The blight, seeing their union as a threat, had shown its hand. Because of that, its direct retaliation proved the terrifying efficacy of their burgeoning bond. This was no longer just about survival. It was about their forced intimacy. In the aftermath, the mark seemed to hum with a new, dangerous power, no longer just a brand, but a living entity. Marcel, horrified by his loss of control, by the primal surrender, retreated further into himself. He pushed away from Rebecca, putting space between them as if the act itself was contaminated. Meanwhile, Rebecca was left grappling with the terrifying intimacy and the pack's immediate danger. Her world tilted again. She felt it, clear as day, the terrifying depth of their connection. The air still thrummed with the aftershocks of the blight's attack, and the echoes of their shared intimacy. To combat the blight's escalating attacks, Rebecca and Marcel had no choice. They had to work together, their actions now perfectly synchronized by the mark. It was as if their bodies knew what the other would do before their minds caught up. They moved as one, a fluid, deadly force. With every step he took, with every move she made, Their bond pulsed. They used their combined power to repel a particularly potent blight manifestation. This time, it tried to corrupt their very senses, making reality twist and distort. Rebecca used her connection to the earth, anchoring them. Marcel, his strategic mind sharp, directed their power, channeling the raw energy of the bond. What followed was a moment of clear, undeniable triumph. They showcased the true strength of their unwilling union, because together, they were formidable. But then, it was born from necessity, not affection. Their faces were grim, their expressions resolute. The pack witnessed their combined power. Murmurs of reluctant hope, tinged with fear, spread through the wolves. They had seen the Alpha and the Omega, the two who hated each other, fight as one. Rebecca's goal was simple: survive the attack and protect her pack. She felt a fierce pride in their combined strength, a power she never knew she possessed. Even so, she also felt an overwhelming sense of emotional exhaustion from the constant push and pull with Marcel, the silent battles raging beneath the surface. After the battle, the air was thick with smoke and the scent of ozone. Marcel's gaze lingered on Rebecca, a new complex emotion mixing with the lingering resentment and undeniable desire. He still couldn't bring himself to fully trust or embrace her, because his past trauma was a deep wound. But then his actions implicitly demonstrated his utter reliance on her. He stood closer, his body angled towards hers, a silent admission of his need. Her name hung in the air, unspoken, but felt. The space between them burned, a quiet promise of what was to come. Even the deepest connection can be shattered. What happens when the very thing meant to save you becomes the weapon that tears you apart? The unity so recently forged in fire was a fragile thing. The Blight, now desperate and cunning, knew this. It launched its most insidious attack yet, a targeted psychic assault that slipped past their physical defenses and aimed straight for the pack's weakest link, its faith in leadership. Rebecca felt it like a cold, creeping fog. Old fears, buried prejudices, all amplified. Whispers slithered through the den like venomous snakes. The unholy bond, they hissed. A curse, not salvation. Pack members, once united, turned on Marcel and Rebecca, their eyes suspicious, their gazes filled with fear. Marcel, caught in the crossfire of internal dissent and the resurfacing of his own trauma, faltered. His strong shoulders seemed to slump. He made a critical error in judgment. Not only that, but he sent a vital hunting party into a known blight-ridden area because he was desperate to prove their strength. What followed was a disaster. The party returned ravaged, several wolves gravely ill, their pelts marred by the blight's corrupting touch. A critical resource, their largest hunting ground, was effectively destroyed. Rebecca's goal was to re-establish unity, to somehow mend the fractured trust. But then, she felt utterly helpless as the pack turned on them. She saw her worst fears realized. Her past help had once again seemingly led to disaster. A crushing wave of despair washed over her, reinforcing her deepest misbelief that she was inherently flawed, utterly incapable of doing anything right. Her chest ached with a familiar emptiness. During the chaos, a voice, sharp as a blade, cut through the din. "It's her fault. The Omega brought this blight upon us." Rebecca froze. It was the very accusation Marcel had once leveled at her. The words cut her to the quick, deeper than any physical wound. Without thinking, her body moved on instinct. She fled the main den, the hateful whispers echoing in her ears, her mark burning with a pain she couldn't outrun. The familiar, desolate path to her old dwelling on the outskirts felt like a welcome embrace. Rebecca retreated, her heart a heavy, broken stone in her chest. She was heartbroken, convinced she had failed. And just like that, her initial belief that she should always be alone because her presence only brought disaster was reaffirming itself with brutal clarity. Her goal was to wallow in her self-pity, to confirm her misbelief that she was destined to be a solitary disaster. She felt profound loneliness, a resentment that curdled in her stomach, and a crushing sense of failure. She pushed away any flicker of hope, any whisper of responsibility. Let them deal with it. I only make things worse. Meanwhile, Marcel was equally burdened. The guilt of his mistake, the loss of pack support, it all weighed him down. He felt utterly isolated, even surrounded by his wolves. His self-loathing, sharp and bitter, began to project onto Rebecca. He pushed her away further, his silent glares colder than ever, even while the mark screamed at him to pull her closer. His wolf howled for her, a deep, primal ache, but he fought it. He built walls higher, thicker, because he couldn't bear to lose control again. As Rebecca sat in her solitary dwelling, the silence stretched, broken only by the mournful wind. The mark on her skin began to dim, its warmth fading like embers in a dying fire. It was a tangible symbol of the fading hope for their fated bond, and by extension, the pack's impending doom. She didn't know what scared her more, the coldness of the mark or the hollowness in her own soul. The dimming of the mark was a prelude to the true nightmare. The blight launched its final, most devastating attack, a surge of dark energy that struck at the Moonstone Den's very core. It was corrupting the pack's spiritual heart, threatening to obliterate their connection, their very essence. The den itself groaned, its ancient stones weeping dust. The pack was in disarray, weakened and fractured by fear and illness. Marcel fought alone, a lone warrior against an unseen enemy. He was overwhelmed, his powerful form swaying, about to fall. Rebecca, watching from afar, hidden in the shadows of the outskirts, saw it all. The den, her home, collapsing. Marcel, her reluctant mate, falling. The mark, now cold and lifeless on her skin, flared with excruciating pain. Not physical, but a soul-deep ache of loss, a terrifying premonition. It was the pain of a bond about to be severed by death, an emptiness that would consume her. Her breath caught. Her chest ached with a pain far greater than anything she'd ever known. In that moment, Rebecca experienced utter despair, believing the pack and Marcel were lost. The pain from the mark forced her to confront her deepest fear. Not just failure, but the complete annihilation of the very connection she had fought so hard to deny. In this crucible, in the span of a breath, she realized the truth. Despite the hate, despite the forced intimacy, she didn't want Marcel or the pack to be destroyed. Her heart skipped a beat. This was Rebecca's ultimate challenge to her misbelief, the full, terrifying cost of letting hate win. Her internal flaw was pushed to its absolute breaking point. This was the moment she truly understood her unwilling love for Marcel and her innate, undeniable desire to save the pack. As Marcel was about to fall, Rebecca heard a distorted echo of his voice through the fading mark, a raw, desperate cry for her. Not as the Alpha, not as his Omega, but as his fated mate. His name hung in the air. This sound, combined with the vision of the den's imminent destruction, ignited a final, desperate surge of defiance within her. A growl rose in her throat. Her wolf pressed forward, and she let it happen. She would not let it end like this. This wasn't just about saving the pack anymore. It was about a fire igniting between them, a dangerous dance of desire that threatened to consume everything. And neither of them could look away. The cold dread of the Blight's victory had been a suffocating blanket, but then Marcel's raw, desperate cry, a sound ripped from his soul, had been a spark. It pierced the despair that had wrapped around Rebecca, igniting a furious, primal need to reach him. Her heart, a drum against her ribs, pounded a frantic rhythm. Without thinking, Rebecca rushed back towards the den, her body moving on instinct, driven by the pain of the mark and the echo of his voice. As Rebecca approached the crumbling entrance, something peculiar about the Blight's spread caught her eye. A pattern. It was weakest where the strongest emotions of unity and love had once flourished, where pack bonds had been thickest. She felt it, clear as day, a subtle shift in the air, a faint warmth in the places where the Blight was thin. And just like that, a profound revelation bloomed in her mind. The blight wasn't just decay. It was a manifestation of fragmented pack bonds, a wound in their collective soul. Her ability to feel the pack's collective pain, amplified by the mark, became her guiding compass, pulling her towards the deepest hurt. Rebecca's goal was no longer just to save the pack. It was to save Marcel, to heal their bond, and to mend the fractured pack. She felt a fierce, desperate surge of hope, a wave of unwavering resolve that washed over her, because she now understood that her own emotional connection, her capacity for love, was the key. She shed her misbelief like an old skin, embracing her true strength, her empathy and intuitive understanding of connections. The focus shifted from physical battle to spiritual healing, a dance of souls. She burst into the den, the air thick with dust and the blight's acrid scent. Marcel was barely standing, his powerful frame slumped against a jagged rock, his golden eyes dull with exhaustion. Instead of hostility, her eyes conveyed a fierce determination, a burning promise. She extended her hand to him, not in defiance, but in true partnership, her palm open. As her wolf stirred, the mark flared with renewed, purposeful heat, a silent invitation. Marcel's gaze, clouded with pain, met hers. He saw the fierce resolve in her eyes, the raw, undeniable love that now burned there. Rebecca didn't just explain her revelation with words. She pushed it through their emotional connection, through the mark. She forced him to feel the truth of the blight's weakness, to feel the burgeoning strength of their combined bond, a current of pure power. His breath hitched. He felt her hope, her desperate need for him, for them. Together, they formulated a daring plan. It was a ritual, ancient and dangerous, that demanded their complete emotional and physical unity, a willing, profound act of love and trust to cleanse the den's core and reignite the pack's shattered bonds. This ritual was intimate, a dance of surrender. It required absolute surrender from both, a merging of body and soul. Rebecca's goal was to convince Marcel, not with logic, but with the raw truth of their fated bond, and to execute this final unifying ritual. She felt empowered, terrified, but utterly determined. As they prepared, the mark pulsed with a profound, almost erotic heat, a constant thrumming beneath their skin. The air thickened, charged with unspoken desire. Marcel, finally shedding his emotional armor, looked at Rebecca with a raw, vulnerable plea for forgiveness, not just for his hatred, but for his blindness, for the years he'd wasted. "Rebecca," he rasped, his voice rough with emotion. Forgive me for everything." This was the first genuine, unforced emotional exchange between them, a bridge built of raw honesty. His hand reached for her, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. Her breath caught. The space between them burned, a promise of what was to come. With his scent in the air, Rebecca leaned into Marcel's touch, her body aching with a longing that transcended pain. As if fate demanded it, they began the ritual, moving through the corrupted den. Their movements were synchronized, their bodies flowing together like water. Their wills were united, a single, burning purpose. The blight fought back fiercely, sensing their intent. It threw illusions at them, warped visions of Rebecca causing the initial disaster, Marcel's horrified face, their past hatred amplified into monstrous forms. Old traumas, whispered fears, all designed to break their resolve and reignite their past animosity. They had to physically and emotionally support each other through these trials. Rebecca pressed against Marcel's back, feeling the solid strength of him. He held her close, his arm a steel band around her waist. Their combined strength and burgeoning love became their shield against the blight's last desperate attempts. With every heartbeat, the mark pulsed with a pleasure that was almost pain, a delicious agony that fueled their power, because their bodies were responding to each other, to the raw, primal energy flowing between them. Rebecca's goal was to maintain her focus and trust in Marcel, pushing through the illusions and the searing pain. She felt a powerful sense of unity with Marcel, a connection deeper than any she'd known. It was more than just a bond. It was a consuming fire that burned away everything but them. As the sky darkened, they reached the corrupted core of the den, the Blight's heart. The Blight conjured the most painful illusion yet, a warped vision of Rebecca, her hands dripping with the Blight's black ichor, causing the initial disaster, followed by Marcel's face, contorted in pure horror. But this time, they met each other's gaze, their eyes locking, acknowledging the shared pain, the past, the trauma. And then, with a single glance, they pushed through it together, stronger than before, their bodies pressed together, their souls entwined. The air thickened around them, heavy with magic and desire. This was it. The final push. The air crackled around Rebecca and Marcel, thick with primal energy and the scent of their mingled desire. They stood at the very core of the den, where the Blight pulsed like a decaying heart. The last illusion of Marcel's horrified face, Rebecca's hands seemingly tainted, shimmered, then dissolved. The moment their eyes locked, it was a silent promise. No more lies, no more fear. Only us. This was the final, most intimate part of the ritual. It required them to fully intertwine their spiritual and physical selves, a complete, raw surrender to their fated bond and their consuming love. Marcel reached for her, his powerful hands cupping her face. Rebecca leaned into his touch, her breath catching as his thumbs stroked her cheeks. What followed was a fusion, a dance of ancient souls. Their bodies pressed together, bare skin against bare skin, the mark on their forearms burning with an ecstatic, blinding light that began to consume the remaining shadows of the Blight. They moved as one, a symphony of touch and spirit. Rebecca felt Marcel's very essence mingling with hers, his strength becoming her own, her intuitive power flowing through him. It was a profound, visually steamy and emotionally intense scene. Their combined will, fueled by love, became a force of pure, white light. And then, the Blight shrieked, a sound of agony as it was expelled from the den, from the very essence of the pack. The pack members, even from a distance, felt the purifying energy wash over them, a warmth spreading through their veins. Their bonds, once fractured, began to mend, knitting together. Hope, a fragile seedling, returned to every wolf's heart. The den itself shuddered, a deep cleansing tremor, then settled, cleansed, vibrant. Rebecca's breath hitched. Her goal was complete and utter unity with Marcel, body and soul, to cleanse the pack. She felt an overwhelming surge of love, an ecstasy that vibrated through every cell. Relief, so profound it brought tears to her eyes, washed over her, shedding all past misbeliefs. Her transformation from an isolated, flawed Omega to a powerful, beloved mate was complete. As the light faded, they were left breathless, their bodies intertwined, skin slick with sweat and magic. The mark on their forearms, once a brand of pain, now glowed a beautiful, radiant symbol of their unbreakable bond. The air was clear, the den felt alive, and a sense of profound peace settled over them. In the quiet that followed the powerful climax, the pack slowly gathered. They emerged from the shadows of the den, hesitant at first, their eyes wide with awe and disbelief. But then, as they saw Rebecca and Marcel standing together, their faces lit by the soft glow of the purified den, they were overcome with relief and renewed strength. They approached, not with fear, but reverence. Their steps were soft, almost worshipful. Marcel, his face softer than Rebecca had ever seen it, his golden eyes filled with a tenderness that made her heart ache, formally addressed the pack. His voice, usually so sharp with command, was now gentle, imbued with a newfound humility. He acknowledged Rebecca as his true mate and equal. "I was blind," he confessed, his gaze sweeping over the pack. "My judgment was clouded by old hurts. Rebecca, she saved us. She alone had the courage, the wisdom to see the truth." He took full responsibility for his past judgments and praised Rebecca's courage and wisdom. Rebecca, no longer an outcast, stood by his side, accepting their respect with quiet dignity. Her head was held high. Her goal was to absorb this new reality, to finally feel truly accepted, truly seen. She felt a profound sense of peace, a deep belonging, and an overwhelming love for Marcel and her pack. What's more, the external conflict, the Blight's hold and the pack's disunity, was resolved. Rebecca's social standing was fully restored and elevated. She was no longer just the Omega, but their Luna. Marcel's leadership was reaffirmed, but now it was a leadership shared, not just by title, but by the very essence of their fated bond. Just then, a small blur of fur darted forward. It was the pup Rebecca had saved earlier, now fully healthy and vibrant, its golden eyes bright with life. It ran to Rebecca, nuzzling her hand, a tangible sign of the healing she had brought. A small, joyful sound escaped Rebecca's lips. Weeks melted into months. The Moonstone pack was thriving, more united and prosperous than ever before. The land, once choked by the Blight, was vibrant again. Trees blossomed with renewed vigor. The rivers flowed clear, and the hunting grounds teemed with life. A new era of prosperity had begun under Rebecca and Marcel's joint leadership. They worked side by side, their bond evident in every glance, every touch. A shared smile, a gentle hand on a shoulder, the way their wolves seemed to hum in unison. Their relationship, once forged in hatred and forced intimacy, was now one of deep trust, passionate love, and unwavering support. Rebecca fully embodied her strength and worth. She was no longer defined by her past mistake, but by her destiny and the profound love she had found. Her goal was to continue nurturing her pack and her bond with Marcel. She felt complete, secure, and deeply loved, finally at peace with herself and her place in the world. They stood together, Rebecca nestled against Marcel's side, overlooking their flourishing territory beneath a sky painted with twilight hues. Hand in hand, their marks glowed softly, a quiet, radiant testament to their love and the destiny they had forged not just for themselves but for their entire pack. The silence that followed was perfect, promising an endless future. The story of Rebecca and Marcel answers the core emotional question. Can hatred born from past trauma transform into a fated love strong enough to save an entire pack? Or are some bonds too broken to mend? Their journey proves that even the deepest hatred can become the foundation for a profound, life-altering love, and that true strength lies in embracing destiny, flaws, and all. What part of Rebecca and Marcel's future would you like to explore next?